Have you ever wondered if somewhere beneath the endless blue waves, an entire city lies waiting to be remembered? Before we dive into this strange and mysterious journey, take just a few seconds to like this video, let me know where you are listening from, and subscribe to the channel, only if you are truly ready to uncover secrets that might keep you awake tonight. Now, let us begin. You are standing on the shore of an ancient world. The ocean breeze whispers, carrying with it fragments of stories that have haunted humanity for thousands of years. They speak of a city of unimaginable glory, a place where golden towers shimmered like fire in the sunlight, and canals flowed with life as if guided by the gods themselves. Atlantis, a name that feels more like a spell than a city. It does not just describe a place, it pulls you into a question that refuses to be answered. Was it real or only a dream woven into the fabric of myth? Imagine a civilization so advanced, its knowledge outshone every other empire. A place of philosophers, warriors, and dreamers, all living within concentric rings of land and sea. To believe in Atlantis is to believe that humanity once touched the edge of perfection, only to lose it all in one cataclysmic night. Close your eyes for a moment. Hear the sound of the waves. Each crash against the rocks is like a heartbeat from the deep, and every echo carries with it a memory that is not your own. Atlantis calls to you not with words, but with silence, an echo that vibrates in your chest, a sensation you can't explain. Picture yourself walking along a vast shore at dusk. The horizon is painted in hues of crimson and gold, the air heavy with the salt of the sea. And there, on the edge of sight, shadows of towers seem to rise above the water, shimmering before vanishing again as if the ocean itself were teasing you with a secret it refuses to surrender. What if those towers were real? What if, just beneath the waves, an entire civilization still breathes in the silence of the abyss? Now imagine waking up in Atlantis itself. The sun rises, casting light on marble streets that spiral outward like the rings of a seashell. Markets buzz with voices, the smell of exotic spices filling the air. Scholars argue in the courtyards, drawing diagrams of the stars in the sand. Children run along bridges of stone that stretch across sparkling canals. Fishermen pull in nets glittering with silver-scaled fish, while priests whisper prayers to gods who may or may not be listening. And you, yes, you are standing among them. What would you do? Would you wander through the great library rumored to hold knowledge lost to time? Or perhaps sit in a tavern by the sea, sipping a strange Atlantean brew that tastes a little too much like seaweed mixed with honey? Maybe you would complain about the lack of Wi-Fi, only to be told by an Atlantean philosopher, we do not need the internet, we have telepathy. It makes you laugh, but then you pause. Because if such a place truly existed, then humanity is not as invincible as we like to believe. Cities can vanish, empires can crumble, and the ocean can reclaim everything we build. Perhaps that is why the story of Atlantis has survived for thousands of years. Not because it is simply a legend, but because it reminds us of our own fragility. We laugh at the idea of gods sinking cities, but we fear the storms, the quakes, the waves we cannot control. Atlantis is not just a city, it is a warning carved into the memory of humankind. And maybe, just maybe, it is also a promise that somewhere out there, beneath leagues of crushing water, lies knowledge waiting to be found. Knowledge of who we were, and who we might yet become. So, tonight, as you drift closer to sleep, allow yourself to follow the current of this story. Do not resist it. Let Atlantis pull you down, gently, into the darkness where truth and myth intertwine. Because what you will discover may not only change the way you see history, it might change the way you see yourself. When did the world first hear the word Atlantis? Not from the whispers of sailors, nor from the carvings of forgotten temples, but from the pages of a philosopher whose words continue to echo through time. It was Plato, the great Greek thinker, who first spoke of a city lost beneath the waves. Imagine sitting in Athens almost 2,400 years ago. The air hums with debate, the streets filled with scholars arguing about justice, virtue, and the meaning of existence. And then, amid these discussions, Plato introduces a tale so strange that it feels less like philosophy and more like a haunting legend. He writes of a city that once existed 9,000 years before his own time, a civilization mighty enough to challenge the known world, only to be swallowed by the sea in a single terrible day. For Plato, Atlantis was not a bedtime story. He placed it within his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, weaving it into conversations about the ideal state, human arrogance, and divine punishment. He describes Atlantis as a vast island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. There, a civilization flourished, blessed with resources, wealth, and knowledge. Its kings ruled with wisdom at first, but over time power twisted into pride, and pride into ruin. And here's the fascinating part: Plato did not say, "I made this up." He claimed he heard the story from his ancestor Solon, who had traveled to Egypt and spoken with priests who guarded records of ancient floods and forgotten empires. If true, then Atlantis was not just a Greek invention, it was a memory preserved across civilizations. Now, pause for a second. Ask yourself this: if you were in Plato's audience, would you have believed him? Imagine you are an Athenian used to hearing about gods, heroes, and myths. But this story, it does not sound like a fable meant to teach children. It sounds like history, and maybe, just maybe, you would lean forward, eyes wide, and whisper to the person beside you, what if he is telling the truth? Of course, critics argue that Plato simply used Atlantis as an allegory, a cautionary tale about what happens when nations grow arrogant and defy the natural order. And maybe they are right, but even if it was a metaphor, why did this particular story survive while countless other myths have crumbled into dust? Why does Atlantis still haunt our imagination, while other parables of ancient Greece fade into the background? Perhaps because it feels possible. Possible that somewhere, once, a civilization advanced and powerful was erased by nature itself. Possible that the ocean has hidden away not just ruins, but a chapter of our history we are too afraid to acknowledge. And is not that the allure of Atlantis, that thin line between myth and memory, where even the greatest philosophers could not quite decide whether they were recounting a story or history itself? Close your eyes for a moment and picture a city so magnificent that even the richest palaces of history would look like cottages beside it. Atlantis was not merely wealthy, it was drenched in wealth, soaked in it like sunlight on a summer afternoon. Imagine bridges made of orichalcum, a legendary metal said to gleam like red gold. Picture walls plated with bronze, towers capped with silver, and temples crowned with pure gold. As the sun struck these structures, the city must have shimmered like a jewel rising from the ocean, dazzling anyone who laid eyes upon it. The Atlanteans built in rings, land and sea weaving together like the design of a cosmic mandala. Ships glided through concentric canals that connected every district, carrying goods from distant lands. Freshwater fountains bubbled in public squares, feeding gardens where exotic flowers perfumed the air. Imagine strolling through such streets at night, lanterns reflecting on water, music drifting from marble balconies, laughter echoing across bridges. It was not just wealth, it was design, harmony, and ambition. Atlantean architects created structures aligned with the stars. Engineers carved aqueducts so precise that modern builders would pause in envy, and artisans sculpted statues so lifelike you would swear the stone could breathe. And then there was the great temple of Poseidon, towering above all else. Its walls glittered with metals and ivory, its roof carved with celestial patterns. Inside, a colossal statue of Poseidon stood, surrounded by seahorses in solid gold. Imagine entering that hall, the scent of incense thick, the echo of chants filling your ears, and the sheer scale making you feel both tiny and terrified. But behind the splendor was something even more intoxicating: power. Atlantis commanded armies unlike any the world had seen, where chariots rolled across polished roads. Fleets of ships dominated the sea, and warriors carried weapons forged not just for battle, but for legend. If you were a ruler of a smaller nation, seeing Atlantis rise on the horizon would be like watching a god descend from the sky. Yet splendor often hides shadows. The Atlanteans had everything: wealth, beauty, knowledge, and power. And when humanity believes it has reached perfection, pride begins to whisper, pride that says we cannot fall, we are untouchable. So ask yourself, if you lived in such magnificence, surrounded by beauty and brilliance beyond imagination, would you have remained humble, or would you too have felt that dangerous pull, that sense that nothing, not even the gods, could bring you down? Great civilizations rarely collapse from weakness. More often, they fall from the weight of their own pride. Atlantis was no exception. In its early days, the city was said to live in harmony with the gods, especially Poseidon, who had once laid claim to the island. Legend tells that Poseidon fell in love with a mortal woman there, and from their union came the first Atlantean kings. The people honored him, built temples in his name, and carried his trident symbol on their banners. Atlantis thrived under divine favor. But power has a strange effect on the human heart. The more the Atlanteans achieved, the more distant they became from the gods who had blessed them. Wealth turned to greed. Knowledge turned to arrogance. Their armies, once defenders of their homeland, became instruments of conquest. They spread across the seas, swallowing smaller nations into their empire. To many, Atlantis must have looked like a shining beacon, but to those who lived in its shadow, it was a storm on the horizon. Now imagine being an Atlantean general at the height of this power. You sit in a grand hall carved from marble and gold. Maps stretch across the table before you, showing nations already subdued and others soon to fall. Would you feel pride, triumph, or would there be a voice, faint but persistent, whispering, "We are becoming something monstrous"? Plato described this as the turning point. The Atlanteans, once noble, grew corrupt. They no longer honored the divine laws, no longer respected balance. Instead, they believed themselves gods among men. And if you think about it, is not that the most dangerous illusion of all, to believe you are untouchable, immortal, chosen above the rest? According to the tale, the gods watched. They watched the feasts, the wars, the cruelty that crept into the heart of Atlantis. And like a parent who sees their child wandering toward fire, they chose to act, not with subtle warnings, not with gentle corrections, but with fury. Some versions say it was Poseidon himself who grew enraged, betrayed by the descendants of his mortal love. Others claim it was a council of gods who decided together that Atlantis must be punished. Whatever the truth, the message was clear. No matter how mighty, no city, no empire, no king is beyond the reach of divine justice. So here's a question for you. If you lived in Atlantis at that moment, enjoying its wealth, laughing at its parties, boasting of its armies, would you have sensed the danger, or would you, like so many others, believe the illusion that even the gods themselves would not dare to strike you down? It began, they say, on a night when the stars themselves seemed restless. The air was thick, heavy, charged with a silence that felt almost alive. Atlantis, so confident, so radiant, did not know that its final sunset had already fallen. Picture yourself there. You walk through marble streets glowing with lamplight. Music drifts from banquet halls, the laughter of nobles spilling into the night. Soldiers patrol lazily, their armor gleaming as if war were only a distant memory. Merchants count their coins, children chase one another across bridges. To the Atlanteans, it was another night of splendor. But beneath their feet, the earth had begun to tremble. First it was faint, so faint that revelers dismissed it as drunken imagination. A goblet rattled on a table. A ripple disturbed the still water in a fountain. Dogs howled in the courtyards, their instincts sharper than human pride. And then came the roar. The ocean did not whisper that night. It screamed. Walls of water rose in the distance, illuminated by flashes of lightning that split the sky. The ground shook with a violence that toppled statues and cracked marble roads. Temples shuddered, columns collapsing as priests cried out in desperation. Panic spread like wildfire. Mothers clutched their children. Warriors dropped their weapons, and even the proudest kings stared at the horizon in terror. Imagine standing on the harbor as the sea pulls back, exposing the seabed like a beast drawing breath before the strike. Fish flop helplessly on the sand. Ships tip awkwardly against the ground. And then, with a force beyond comprehension, the water returns. No, it attacks. A wave taller than the temples themselves crashes into the city, devouring streets, swallowing towers, tearing lives from the land. Screams mix with the thunder of the sea. Fires break out as oil lamps shatter, flames hissing before being drowned. Horses bolt, bridges collapse. Palaces vanish under torrents of water. No wealth, no army, no wall of bronze or gold could stop the fury of the ocean. Now pause for a moment. If you were there, clinging to the stones of a crumbling house, watching your city disappear into the abyss, what would you think? Would you curse the gods, beg for mercy, or would you realize, too late, that the arrogance of Atlantis had always carried within it the seeds of its destruction? In a single night, glory turned to ruin. The jewel of the seas became a grave beneath the waves, and as silence returned, only the ocean remained, its surface calm once more, as if nothing had happened at all. The ocean may have silenced Atlantis, but silence does not erase memory. For centuries after its fall, whispers of the lost city drifted across cultures, carried like seeds by wind and tide. Picture ancient Greece long after Plato had passed. Philosophers debated his story, some dismissing it as allegory, others wondering if he had revealed a truth too dangerous to ignore. Sailors spoke of strange shapes rising from beneath the water, ruins glimpsed in the deep. Was it imagination, or the faint bones of Atlantis showing through the skin of the sea? Beyond Greece, echoes stretched further. In Egypt, priests already spoke of floods and forgotten kingdoms. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets told of deluges that swallowed entire worlds. Even in distant lands across oceans, myths of great cities drowned by divine wrath seem to mirror the same pattern. Different languages, different gods, yet the same story: humanity builds too high, and the waters rise to humble it. And what of those who claim to have found it? Medieval travelers returning from voyages whispered of columns hidden beneath the waves, of islands that appeared and vanished like mirages. Some said the Canary Islands were once mountaintops of Atlantis. Others swore the Caribbean held fragments of it, the sea floor dotted with impossible stone roads. Now pause and think, why do humans love such stories? Perhaps because we see ourselves in them. The idea that greatness can vanish overnight terrifies us. And yet, we crave the thought that some echo remains, that if we dive deep enough, if we search far enough, we may brush against the edge of forgotten glory. Imagine yourself as a fisherman centuries ago, sailing into uncharted waters. The fog thickens, and suddenly your net catches on something heavy. You peer into the water and see stone, carved stone, in patterns too deliberate to be natural. Would your heart race with excitement or freeze with fear? Would you tell anyone or keep the secret, worried they would call you mad? Legends are stubborn. They do not fade because they are false. They endure because they strike something true in us. Atlantis whispers across time not because we are sure it existed, but because we are afraid it might have. And perhaps, deep down, we know that if it could vanish, so could we. If Atlantis vanished into the sea, why did its story survive? The answer, some believe, lies in Egypt. Plato himself claimed that his ancestor, Solon, traveled to Egypt nearly 200 years before his time. There, in the great temples along the Nile, Solon met priests who told him of a mighty island empire that had existed 9,000 years earlier. According to them, Atlantis had once waged war against the known world and had fallen beneath the waves in a single dreadful night. Imagine Solon standing in the cool shade of an Egyptian temple. Around him, hieroglyphs cover the walls, images of gods, floods, and stars. The priests, keepers of ancient memory, tell their story in solemn voices. Solon, astonished, takes notes, and centuries later, Plato uses those fragments to weave the tale that still captures us today. Why Egypt? Because Egypt was obsessed with time, with eternity. Their temples were not just places of worship, they were archives written in stone. If any civilization could preserve the memory of Atlantis, it would be one that measured not years but millennia. And here's where the mystery deepens. Some researchers argue that similarities exist between Egyptian architecture and descriptions of Atlantis. Concentric layouts, monumental stone structures, even a fascination with the stars. Could there have been a cultural link? Did survivors of Atlantis flee to Egypt, carrying with them fragments of their knowledge? Think of the pyramids. Even now, scientists debate how such colossal structures were built with Bronze Age tools. Was it purely human ingenuity? Or could it have been knowledge passed down from a lost civilization? Some whisper that the alignments of the pyramids with Orion's belt suggest wisdom older than Egypt itself. Now let us imagine, just for fun, that you are an Atlantean refugee arriving on the banks of the Nile. The locals stare at you, your strange language, your unusual tools. Would you try to rebuild your lost city here? Would you teach them how to quarry stone, how to align temples with the heavens? Or would you keep your secrets, guarding them as the last relics of your drowned home? Egypt, with its eternal sands, may have become a library for Atlantis, a place where whispers of that drowned city found a second life. And perhaps that is why, even today, when we gaze at the pyramids, a small part of us wonders, are we looking at Egypt's glory or Atlantis's shadow? When Europeans first sailed west across the Atlantic, they thought they were discovering a new world. But for centuries, whispers suggested that perhaps it was not new at all. That long before Columbus, a powerful civilization had already reached those distant shores. Some even claimed it was Atlantis. Picture a map of the Atlantic Ocean. On one side, Europe and Africa. On the other, the Americas. And right in the middle, vast waters, scattered islands. Strange currents. Could Atlantis have once stood there, a bridge between two worlds? The Maya and the Inca built pyramids and temples that baffle modern engineers. Their calendars aligned with the heavens, their mathematics rivaled the Greeks. To some, this raises a tantalizing question. Did they inherit fragments of Atlantean knowledge, survivors of a sunken empire, drifting westward, bringing with them seeds of architecture, astronomy, and myth? Consider the city of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, built on concentric canals and causeways. Doesn't it echo Plato's description of Atlantis? Rings of land and water, a city shimmering above the lake, or think of the Mayan obsession with cycles of destruction and rebirth, eerily similar to Atlantis' story of hubris and downfall. Of course, mainstream historians argue that these similarities are coincidence. Human civilizations, separated by oceans, can still arrive at similar ideas. A pyramid is simply the most stable way to build tall with stone. A calendar must follow the stars. Fair enough. But still, do not you feel the itch? The suspicion that maybe, just maybe, these connections are not accidents but echoes. Now imagine yourself as an explorer stepping into the dense jungles of Central America for the first time. You stumble upon a massive stone city, its pyramids towering, its plazas wide, its glyphs whispering of gods and floods. Would you think, this is new? Or would a shiver run down your spine as you realize you have walked into the shadow of something far older, something that might reach back across the ocean? Here's a thought: if Atlantis did send survivors west, the Americas may not have been a new world at all. They may have been the continuation of an older one, a world reborn, carrying fragments of a drowned memory. For centuries, Atlantis lived only in myths and manuscripts. But in the modern age, science decided to dive deeper, literally. Imagine the first submarines plunging beneath the waves, their tiny windows revealing worlds hidden from the human eye. Later came sonar, mapping the contours of the ocean floor like a blind man learning to see with sound. And what did scientists find? Vast ridges, sunken plateaus, and shapes that seemed too geometric to be natural. Take the Bimini Road in the Bahamas. Discovered in the 1960s, it is a stretch of massive stone blocks lying beneath shallow waters. To some, it is just natural beach rock fractured into neat patterns. But to others, it is the paved remains of a lost harbor, an Atlantean boulevard swallowed by the sea. Divers who swim along it often describe the eerie feeling of walking down a street built for giants, silent now except for the hum of the ocean. Or consider the strange maps that predate modern exploration. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, shows parts of the Americas and even Antarctica, centuries before they were officially discovered. Could such knowledge have been handed down from a civilization older than Egypt, older than Greece? A civilization that had mapped the world before it sank. And then there are anomalies on the ocean floor. Sonar scans have revealed structures in the Caribbean and off the coast of Japan that look like step pyramids. Avenues, even cities. Mainstream geologists call them natural formations, but explorers who've touched those stones swear they feel carved. Intentional, as if a forgotten hand once shaped them. Here's a thought experiment for you. Imagine you are a deep-sea diver descending into blackness. Your flashlight cuts across ruins, columns, staircases, maybe even a statue staring back with blind eyes. Would you believe you have stumbled upon Atlantis, or would your rational mind whisper, "This is impossible"? Science does not always kill mystery. Sometimes it feeds it. The deeper we look, the more questions we uncover. And in the case of Atlantis, the ocean seems determined to hold its secrets just out of reach, as if daring us to keep searching. If there is any corner of the modern world that feels haunted by Atlantis, it is the Bermuda Triangle. Stretching between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, this mysterious region has swallowed ships and planes for decades, sparking theories that the lost city's shadow lingers beneath its waters. Imagine you are a pilot flying over calm seas. The sky is clear, your instruments steady, and then, without warning, your compass spins, radios fall silent, and clouds form walls around you. Within minutes, you are lost, vanished into the triangle, as so many have before. Where did you go? Could Atlantis be waiting below? A ghostly hand pulling you under. Theories abound. Some claim the triangle sits above strange magnetic anomalies, natural forces that disrupt navigation. Others whisper of energy crystals buried deep below, remnants of Atlantean technology still pulsing after thousands of years. Picture a massive power source once used to light cities or move ships, now broken and unstable, sending chaotic signals that twist compasses and scramble radar. There are divers who swear they have seen structures on the ocean floor within the triangle, walls, steps, even roads. To them, the triangle is not a mystery at all, but a warning: here lies Atlantis, and it is still dangerous. Of course, skeptics roll their eyes. They point to storms, human error, or rogue waves as explanations. But admit it, does not the Bermuda Triangle feel different? Doesn't it carry an unease that simple science fails to erase? Here's a playful thought. Imagine if the Atlanteans themselves engineered the triangle, a kind of supernatural security system meant to keep intruders away. A cosmic no trespassing sign written in storms and disappearances. If that were true, then every vanished ship was not an accident but a choice. A reminder from a civilization that refuses to be forgotten. So next time you see a headline about a yacht gone missing or a plane vanishing from radar, remember this: perhaps it was not lost at all. Perhaps it was claimed, swallowed by the same mystery that took Atlantis centuries ago. Atlantis has often been described not just as a wealthy kingdom, but as a civilization whose science seemed to outpace its time by millennia. If Plato's words were true, the Atlanteans were not only masters of architecture and governance, but pioneers of technology so advanced that even today feels like science fiction. Imagine walking into an Atlantean workshop. Tools gleam with precision. Metals shine with purity that modern smelters would envy. Scholars speak of energy flowing through crystals, harnessed not for decoration, but as sources of power. Picture a city where lamps glowed without fire, ships moved without sails, and healing was achieved not by herbs but by frequencies and light. Theorists suggest Atlantis may have mastered renewable energy thousands of years before we even dreamed of it. Some believe they drew power from the ocean itself, tapping into geothermal vents or tidal forces. Others whisper about a crystal grid, vast networks of quartz amplifying and distributing energy like a wireless system long before electricity. Sounds far-fetched, maybe, But remember this, modern science has only scratched the surface of what energy can do. Even now, we discover ancient batteries in Mesopotamia, maps with unexplained accuracy, and megaliths aligned to solstices with surgical precision. If those civilizations could achieve such feats, why not Atlantis, especially if it stood at the peak of human ingenuity? And here's where the thought gets unsettling. If Atlantis had such technology, what happened to it? Was it destroyed in the flood, scattered into myths? Or buried deep beneath the sea waiting for rediscovery? Or worse, could that very technology have caused its downfall? Imagine an experiment gone wrong. A power source unleashed, destabilizing the island until nature itself tore it apart. Now let us play with the idea. If you lived in Atlantis and had access to such wonders, what would you do? Would you use it to heal, to travel, to light the world, or would you, like so many civilizations since, be tempted to weaponize it, to make your nation not just powerful but untouchable? Perhaps that is the ultimate caution of Atlantis, that knowledge without humility becomes a double-edged sword, brilliant enough to build a paradise, but dangerous enough to destroy it. If Atlantis truly fell, could its secrets have survived? Some believe they did, not in ruins beneath the sea, but in the hands of secret societies who carried the knowledge across millennia. From the Masons to the Rosicrucians, whispers of Atlantis run like a hidden current. These groups often speak of ancient wisdom, of geometry and energy, of symbols passed down through ages. Look at the all-seeing eye, the pyramid, the compass. Do they echo fragments of a city lost to time? Imagine hooded figures in candlelit chambers, tracing symbols onto parchment. They speak of power, of enlightenment, of a forgotten heritage. To outsiders, it looks like ritual. To believers, it is memory, an inheritance from Atlantis itself. Some even claim that Plato's story was not meant for everyone, but a coded message to those already initiated. And then there are the conspiracy theories, that the Vatican holds records of Atlantis deep in its archives, that world leaders secretly study Atlantean technology to gain an edge, that the Library of Alexandria, before it burned, contained scrolls that traced directly back to survivors of the sunken city. Skeptical, that is fair. But let us be honest, history is filled with knowledge lost in fire, war, and suppression. Who is to say fragments of Atlantis did not slip through, preserved by those who swore never to let it vanish entirely? Now imagine yourself stumbling upon such a secret. You find an old manuscript, its ink faded, its diagrams strange, rings of land, strange devices, crystals emitting light. Would you dismiss it as nonsense, or would you feel the weight of hidden truth, pressing on your chest, demanding to be remembered? Perhaps Atlantis is not just a story we tell. Perhaps it is a secret that has been told and retold in shadows, waiting for the moment when the world is ready to listen again. And maybe, just maybe, that moment is closer than we think. Not every tale of Atlantis has to drown in tragedy. Sometimes, to truly imagine this lost city, we need a little humor, because even a civilization of gods and kings must have had its everyday quirks. Picture it, a bustling Atlantean marketplace. Merchants shout about their goods, fresh fish, rare spices, crystals that may or may not hum when you hold them. Children run between stalls, chasing each other with seaweed like it is the latest toy. And in the corner, a philosopher complains, "Back in my day, people listened to wisdom. Now they just want faster ships." What if Atlantis had taverns? Imagine sailors gathering after a long voyage, boasting about the size of the sea monsters they almost caught. One of them swears he saw a squid big enough to swallow a temple. Another insists it was just his mother-in-law. The laughter shakes the walls louder than the waves. Or think about Atlantean fashion. With all their wealth, you would expect elegance. But wealth does not guarantee taste. Imagine noblemen strutting through marble halls in tunics covered with seashells, clinking like wind chimes with every step. Imagine nobles competing over who has the biggest crystal jewelry, so heavy that one man can't even lift his arm to wave. Even their advanced science could have had comic moments. Picture an inventor bragging about his crystal-powered cart, until it suddenly zooms off into a canal with him screaming on top. Somewhere in the city, an Atlantean scribe probably wrote, note, reduce horsepower by at least 50%. And maybe, just maybe, the reason Atlantis disappeared was not divine punishment at all. Maybe it was one massive plumbing accident. Imagine the engineers panicking. I told you not to connect the freshwater system to the tidal generators. A moment later, splash. End of civilization. Humor does not cheapen Atlantis. It makes it human. It reminds us that even in the grandest civilizations, people joked, laughed, tripped over their sandals, and told ridiculous stories. And is not that comforting to know that no matter how advanced, no matter how powerful, people are still people? Dreamers, worriers, and yes, jokers. So the next time you picture Atlantis, do not just imagine golden temples and angry gods. Imagine a fisherman telling dad jokes by the dock, or a scholar grumbling about noisy neighbors, or a child sneaking sweets before dinner, because maybe laughter, too, was part of the greatness that the sea could never wash away. The ocean has always been both a cradle and a coffin. To find Atlantis, one must be willing to enter its black heart, to descend into the abyss where sunlight dies. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself inside a submersible, metal walls groaning as pressure mounts. The cabin hums softly, the only light coming from the glow of your instruments. Outside, there is nothing but darkness so thick it feels alive. Each meter downward is another heartbeat closer to the unknown. Your radio crackles, depth 2,000 meters. Still no sign of life, just endless water pressing against the glass. And then you see it, shapes in the dark. First, they look like shadows, but as your lights sweep across the ocean floor, they sharpen, stone columns rising like broken teeth, staircases half buried in silt, arches that lead nowhere. The crew falls silent. Even through the thick glass, you feel the weight of history pressing down. Could these ruins be natural formations, perhaps? But the symmetry, the patterns, the impossible right angles, they scream of design, and with that realization comes dread. Suddenly, your submersible shudders. The ground itself trembles. Silt rises like smoke, clouding your vision. A voice in your headset mutters, "Is it an earthquake? Or is it something else? Something stirring in the deep, guarding its secrets." Your light catches on something massive. A wall carved with symbols, eroded but still visible. Concentric rings, like Plato's description of Atlantis. You lean closer, trying to trace them. For a moment, you feel almost as if the city is waking, aware of your intrusion. And then the instruments flicker. The compass spins, lights dim. The hum of the engine falters. The abyss has swallowed machines far stronger than yours. You grip the seat, heart pounding, as the pilot whispers, "We should not be here." Here's the question: if you were in that submersible staring into ruins that may rewrite human history, would you keep going deeper, risking everything for the truth, or would you surface, safe but haunted forever by what you might have found? Every legend needs a core, a heartbeat, a secret so powerful that it explains both glory and destruction. For Atlantis, that secret has often been imagined as the crystal heart. Whispers describe it as a massive crystal, pulsing with energy, buried deep in the city's temple. To some, it was a power source, a machine that drew strength from the earth and sea, lighting homes, powering ships, even bending weather to the will of its masters. To others, it was a spiritual relic, a conduit between humanity and the gods, glowing with divine favor. Picture the scene. In the center of Atlantis stood the Temple of Poseidon, its columns gleaming with ivory and gold, and within it the crystal heart pulsed like a living thing. Scholars studied its vibrations, priests guarded its shrine, rulers feared and worshipped it all at once. The air around it shimmered, and anyone who approached felt both awe and unease, as though they were standing at the edge of creation itself. Now imagine you are there, one of the few allowed to step into that sacred chamber. The light from the crystal washes over your face, warm and cold at the same time. You reach out, hand trembling, and feel a hum that passes not just through your skin, but into your bones, into your mind. What would you do? Pull back in fear or lean closer, intoxicated by the promise of limitless power. Some theorists suggest the crystal heart was real technology, perhaps an enormous quartz generator capable of storing and releasing energy in ways we cannot yet replicate. Others believe it was symbolic, a metaphor for the dangerous hubris of Atlantis, knowledge concentrated in one fragile point, tempting but catastrophic. And then comes the darker thought, perhaps it was both. Perhaps the crystal heart was real, and it was precisely its misuse that doomed Atlantis. Imagine a ritual gone wrong, an overload of power, a single blinding flash, and then the ground trembles, the seas rise, and an entire civilization collapses in a single night. If Atlantis did fall by the crystal's hand, then the legend is not just a warning about pride, but about technology itself. Tools are never just tools. In the wrong hands, they become weapons. In careless hands, they become disasters. So here is the question for you if you stood before the crystal heart today. Pulsing with secrets older than history, would you have the strength to turn away, or would you touch it, unable to resist the promise of holding the world's power in your palm? Legends live in stories. Science lives in evidence. And yet, sometimes the two meet awkwardly, like strangers who realize they might be long-lost relatives. Atlantis sits exactly at that intersection. On one side, you have Plato's words, philosophical dialogues meant to spark thought, not necessarily record history. On the other, you have geology, archaeology, and oceanography searching for proof. And here's the twist. The deeper science digs, the more it finds traces that make the legend harder to dismiss. Take geology. We know that coastlines shift, islands rise and sink, earthquakes and tsunamis can erase entire cities in hours. Think of Pompeii, frozen in ash. Think of Santorini, where an eruption 3,600 years ago destroyed the Minoan civilization and may have inspired Plato's tale. If such disasters happened in known history, why not earlier on a grander scale? Then there is archaeology. Divers have found stone structures off the coasts of Japan, India, and the Caribbean. Formations some say are natural. Others swear are man-made. Ancient maps show landmasses that no longer exist. And myths across cultures describe floods so similar they feel like eyewitness reports rather than fables. Science, of course, urges caution. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. A pile of rocks underwater does not equal Atlantis. But here's the fascinating part. Again and again, legends once dismissed as pure fantasy have turned out to be real. Troy was thought a myth until ruins were found in Turkey. The Amazon was said to be uninhabitable until satellite scans revealed ancient cities hidden beneath the jungle. Could Atlantis be next on that list? Now let us imagine you are a scientist presenting at a conference. You show sonar scans of the ocean floor, revealing perfect grids and right angles. The audience scoffs until you overlay Plato's description, and the match is uncanny. Do you risk your reputation chasing a legend, or do you shrug and let the mystery remain unsolved? That is where Atlantis thrives, in the gap between certainty and imagination. It forces us to ask, how much of history is still buried? How many legends are simply truths waiting for the right discovery? Water remembers. At least that is how it feels when you study the myths of ancient peoples. Across continents and cultures, stories of a world-ending flood echo with eerie similarity, as if humanity carries a shared memory of the sea rising to reclaim what was once its own. Think of the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, one of the oldest known works of literature. It tells of gods unleashing a flood so vast it nearly erased humankind, with only one man surviving in a great boat. Sound familiar? It should, because thousands of years later, the Bible tells a nearly identical story of Noah and his ark. Travel east to India, and you will find the story of Manu, who was warned by a fish of a great flood and built a boat to survive. In China, myths speak of Emperor Yu taming cataclysmic waters that once drowned the land. The Greeks had Deucalion and Pyrrha, who survived a flood sent by Zeus to cleanse the world. Different lands, different gods, the same flood. So what does this mean? Were these stories pure coincidence, tales spun to explain natural disasters? Or do they point to something larger, a global event that scarred humanity so deeply it burned itself into our collective memory. Here's where Atlantis fits in. Some scholars argue that the story of Atlantis is not separate from these floods, but part of the same tapestry. That perhaps Atlantis is not just a city, but a symbol of a world before the waters rose. When Plato spoke of its destruction, maybe he was echoing a memory preserved not only in Greece but in every corner of the earth. Now picture yourself as one of those survivors, watching mountains vanish beneath waves, carrying nothing but fragments of your old life. You wander into a new land, tell the locals of the flood that destroyed your home, and they pass that story on to their children. Centuries later, those children's children tell it again, and suddenly, a myth is born. And maybe that is what myths truly are, not fictions but memories. Blurred, exaggerated, reshaped by time, but still carrying the truth of something humanity cannot forget. So ask yourself, when you hear of Noah, of Deucalion, of Manu, are you hearing different stories? Or are you hearing the same story told in 100 voices? Each whispering of a flood that might have been Atlantis itself. If Atlantis truly existed, then its people were not only masters of the sea, they were, perhaps, masters of the sky as well. Countless theories suggest that the Atlanteans possessed an extraordinary understanding of astronomy, knowledge that may have guided their cities, their calendars, even their destiny. Picture the night sky thousands of years ago. No light pollution, no skyscrapers, just a vast ocean of stars stretching across the heavens. To the Atlanteans, these lights were not just decoration, they were maps, clocks, prophecies. Constellations may have guided their ships across the seas, while the movements of planets told them when to plant, when to harvest, when to build. Some researchers argue that the very layout of Atlantis, with its concentric circles of land and sea, may have mirrored celestial patterns. Perhaps the city itself was a cosmic calendar, designed to reflect the harmony of heaven and earth. Imagine walking through its streets and realizing every canal, every bridge, every temple aligned not just with geography, but with the stars above. The parallels are striking. The pyramids of Egypt align with Orion's belt. The temples of the Maya track the solstices with precision. Stonehenge marks the sunrise of midsummer. If so many cultures carried star knowledge, is it so impossible to think Atlantis may have been the source, or at least part of the chain? And here's a tantalizing thought. Ancient myths often speak of gods descending from the sky, teaching humanity the secrets of civilization. Could these stories actually describe Atlanteans, astronomer priests who seemed godlike in their ability to predict eclipses, comets, and celestial cycles? Now imagine yourself lying on a beach in Atlantis, waves lapping gently at your feet. Above you, the Milky Way glows like spilled silver. A philosopher beside you whispers, "The stars are not just above us, they are within us." In that moment, you might feel what the Atlanteans felt. That to understand the stars was to understand your place in the universe. If Atlantis did hold this cosmic wisdom, then perhaps its greatest loss was not its buildings or its armies, but the knowledge of the stars. Knowledge that could have guided humanity further, faster, had it not been swallowed by the sea. Atlantis may have sunk thousands of years ago, but its echo has never stopped rippling through human imagination. Even in our modern age of satellites and skyscrapers, the myth refuses to die. If anything, it feels louder than ever. Think about how often Atlantis appears in our culture. Movies portray it as a glittering underwater kingdom, guarded by mermaids or superheroes. Novels turn it into a stage for romance, mystery, and cosmic adventure. Video games invite you to explore its ruins, uncover its treasures, or even rebuild the city itself. Atlantis has become less of a lost civilization and more of a symbol, a canvas for every dream and fear we project onto the unknown. But it is not just fiction. Scientists and explorers still chase the legend. Expeditions scan the seabed with sonar, hoping to glimpse a grid of streets. Historians pore over Plato's dialogues, searching for overlooked clues. Even Google once released a feature in Google Earth where users claimed to see streets beneath the Atlantic, sparking viral headlines. The streets turned out to be a glitch in sonar mapping, but for a brief moment the world held its breath. Why does this legend cling to us so tightly? Perhaps because it offers both a warning and a promise. A warning that arrogance leads to downfall, and a promise that hidden knowledge still waits to be found. A treasure chest buried not just in the sea, but in our collective curiosity. Now imagine yourself scrolling through the news one morning and seeing the headline, Atlantis discovered. What would you feel first? Excitement, disbelief, or dread? Would you book the first ticket to visit the ruins, or would you avoid them, afraid that some things are meant to remain lost? In truth, Atlantis is already alive in modern times, not as stone ruins, but as an idea. And ideas can be just as powerful as any city of gold. They guide us, haunt us, inspire us to keep asking questions. So when you hear the word Atlantis today, do not just think of a city swallowed by the sea. Think of it as a mirror, a reflection of our hopes, our fears, and our endless hunger to know what lies just beyond the horizon. For all its splendor, Atlantis carries shadows darker than its golden temples. If we peel back the myths of beauty and power, we find whispers of secrets too disturbing to ignore. Some say the Atlanteans practiced forbidden sciences, experiments that blended flesh and spirit, seeking to create beings more than human. Strange hybrids appear in scattered myths, men with fish-like features, women with voices that could bend the will of others. Were these mere stories of sirens and sea monsters, or memories of Atlantean creations gone wrong? Others claim that the rulers of Atlantis delved into rituals not of gods, but of darker forces. Imagine torchlit chambers where priests chant not to Poseidon, but to nameless entities from the deep. In return, they were promised knowledge, strength, even immortality. But bargains with the abyss always demand a price. Perhaps the flood was not punishment from above, but payment collected from below. There are also tales of a weapon, one so powerful it could shatter mountains and boil seas. Some call it the Trident of Poseidon, others believe it was Atlantean technology mistaken for divine wrath. Imagine a device that harnessed the energy of the Earth's core, capable of leveling entire nations. If such a weapon existed, then perhaps the gods did not destroy Atlantis at all. Perhaps Atlantis destroyed itself. Now think of the silence that followed. A city that glittered with light and music reduced to nothing but bubbles rising from the depths. If you lean close to the ocean at night, some say you can still hear it, the cries of a people who reached too far, too fast, and fell into their own abyss. And here is the question I leave with you. If Atlantis held secrets so dark, do we really want to find it? Would we unlock wisdom or unleash the very curse that drowned it? The ocean has always hidden its secrets well. But imagine, for a moment, that we have the courage to descend farther than anyone has before. To chase Atlantis into the black heart of the abyss. Your vessel sinks past 3,000 meters. Light is gone. Pressure crushes against the hull like an invisible fist. Strange creatures drift by, glowing with eerie light, jellyfish like lanterns, fish with teeth like glass. And then, out of the darkness, a shape emerges. It is not random. It is not natural. It is a wall. Massive blocks of stone rise from the seafloor, aligned with impossible precision. You follow it, heart hammering, until it leads to a gateway half buried in silt. Beyond it lies a city frozen in silence. Streets choked with sand. Towers snapped in half. Arches leading into endless night. For a moment you forget to breathe. This is not myth. This is not Plato. This is real. Your floodlights sweep across carvings, spirals, stars. And something stranger, a map etched into the wall, showing lands both familiar and lost, feels less like architecture and more like a message, left behind for whoever dares to find it. But then, the ocean reminds you where you are. The ground quakes, sending clouds of dust into the water. The instruments shriek warnings. A current rips across your hull, as if something unseen wants to push you back. The city stirs, not alive, but restless, as though the memory of its fall refuses to sleep. Here's the terrible choice. Do you go deeper, risking your vessel and your life for one more glimpse of truth? Or do you rise, knowing you may never return? That Atlantis will slip again into legend, untouched, unproven. You grip the controls, sweat cold on your forehead. Outside, the city waits. Above, the surface calls. And between them lies a silence heavier than the sea itself. This is the final descent, and it belongs to you. When the search for Atlantis brings us to the edge of darkness, it also forces us to look inward. What is it we are really chasing? A lost city? Or something within ourselves? The ruins, if they exist, are silent. They cannot tell us their story. But the fact that we keep diving, keep dreaming, says more about us than about them. Atlantis has become a mirror, reflecting our fears of destruction and our hope for renewal. Think of how many times humanity has stood on the brink. Empires rising, boasting of immortality, only to collapse into dust. Floods, wars, plagues. Atlantis is not just one city's fate, but a pattern written again and again across history. And still, every time we rebuild. Maybe that is why the legend haunts us. Because deep down, we know it is not only about them, it is about us. About how fragile greatness can be. About how quickly oceans, literal or metaphorical, can wash away everything we believe permanent. But there is another side. Atlantis also speaks of resilience. If survivors carried fragments of its knowledge to Egypt, to the Americas, to distant lands, then its story never truly drowned. It lived on in whispers, in myths, in symbols carved into stone and memory. So imagine standing on a quiet shore at night. The sea stretches before you, dark and endless. Somewhere beneath it, perhaps, lies a city of gold. But maybe the true treasure is not the ruins, it is the lesson. That power without wisdom brings ruin. That pride without humility brings downfall. And that even in loss, humanity carries the strength to remember, to retell, and to begin again. Atlantis may be gone, but its reflection glimmers still, in the depths of the sea and in the depths of us. Atlantis may have drowned, but legends never stay buried. They resurface, reshaped by each generation, reborn in new forms. Perhaps that is Atlantis's truest legacy. Not a city of stone, but an idea that refuses to die. Look at how often humanity dreams of building utopias. Floating cities on the ocean, colonies on Mars, megastructures rising into the clouds. Every time we imagine a world better than the one we know, we are echoing Atlantis. Its ghost guides our ambition, even if we do not realize it. Modern architects speak of eco-cities powered by renewable energy, designed in harmony with water and sky. Doesn't that sound like Atlantis reborn? Scientists explore the ocean floor, discovering ecosystems that thrive without sunlight, inspiring us to rethink survival. Entrepreneurs dream of seasteading, communities floating on waves, self-sufficient and untouchable. Each vision carries a flicker of Atlantis's flame. But here's the challenge: can we learn from the past? If Atlantis fell because of arrogance, then our modern Atlantean dreams must be tempered with humility. Technology alone cannot save us if we forget balance. Progress without wisdom is just another wave waiting to crash. Now imagine, centuries from now, people telling stories about us. They speak of towering cities, machines that touched the stars, and a people who thought themselves invincible. Will they tell of our triumphs or our downfall? Will they whisper that we, too, were in Atlantis? And yet, there is hope. Because if Atlantis can live on for thousands of years as an idea, then perhaps so can we. Perhaps Atlantis is not a warning of doom, but a promise that even when civilizations fall, humanity always finds a way to rise again. So the next time you hear the name Atlantis, do not think only of what was lost. Think of what might be built. Think of the city not beneath the sea, but ahead of us, Atlantis reborn, not in ruins, but in our dreams, our innovations, and our will to keep reaching beyond the horizon. And now, our journey through the mysteries of Atlantis comes to a close. You have walked its shining streets, felt the terror of its final night, and glimpse the secrets it may still hide beneath the waves. But remember, Atlantis is not just a city lost to the sea. It is a story, a warning, a dream that lives on in every generation that dares to ask, what if? So before you drift off to sleep, take a moment to reflect. What part of Atlantis spoke to you most? The splendor, the science, the laughter, or the shadows? And if the lost city were ever truly found, would you want humanity to uncover its secrets, or leave them buried where they rest? Thank you for sharing this journey with me tonight. If you enjoyed traveling through these legends, do not forget to like this video. Let me know in the comments where in the world you are listening from, and subscribe so you will be here for the next story we tell together. Now close your eyes, let the waves carry you gently, and as you fall asleep, imagine the ocean whispering, not of loss, but of endless possibility. Good night, dreamer. Atlantis may be gone, but your dreams will always rise again.